Is he behaving over here? I'm gonna be busy tomorrow.
Boy.
They're training.
No.
Ain't nothing.
Sleep.
Take class on Sunday, right? You can take class on Sunday, right?
I love everything about reading.
Yeah. 18. Graduate.
And we,
She got in.
Yeah, because I've done the bank thing so fast.
We drove right by the ATM, I forgot.
First days there.
and I said,
That's
I
cool.
never did that.
No, I remember
She couldn't tell whether she was.
Oh, wow.
Like the young.
But see, the little ones are really
Moms?
sweet. That's what I love about this. It's just the only thing I did in my life.
I'm gonna be busy tomorrow.
Oh, right. And then I always call her.
I'm gonna
You
get
always
you
call
out of
her. Send Keith home and everything.
She gave me how much you want.
Hey, Dana.
And I'm gonna show her how to make.
Have a chair.
Meet me down there.
I got up and hurried.
Yeah. Get your coffee, girl.
She's got to get student teacher. But she's like,
That's a better. Plus, it's good to go through several different teachers, so you can get your own style, because maybe this teacher, this doesn't fit with your personality. It's not your. And plus, maybe this teacher's gonna get what you like, and that teacher is. Well, you put it together. It's good to have a variety.
she's got my mom.
When you have a student teacher.
Like this kind of discuss and they would start to
Oh, there's yours.
I love it.
He's looking for him.
Oh, okay. Where we live now. Senior intro. They have and so we go to school and I would hate to be.
Don't do that to see that.
I'm not gonna sleep tonight, I feel so bad.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry.
Is your dog sleeping all night? Yeah, she is in her crate, yeah. Ours wakes us up at
Because it's just natural.
Ours is 5.
5:30, 5:30.
5:30.
What time does it go to this?
She comes
I'm gonna tell you where your notes are.
about 9 to 9:30. Trying to keep her up. Don't talk happy.
Ours is
My dad was my dad.
I feel a little bad already.
Well, at least it's a smaller dog.
Guilt, it's a great
I
motivation.
know she's 13 pounds. That's all.
I've been set free from the law since then.
Yes. Not in this baptized, brother.
She pulls you around and you're supposed to heal.
All right, let's
Settle down.
spend some time in praise and thanksgiving.
So did you write what I
Thine of my life, I crown thee now, thine shall the glory be. Lest I forget thy Lord crown brow, lead me to Calvary. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thine love for me, lead me to Calvary. Show me the tomb where thou wast laid, tenderly mourned and wept. Angels in robes of light array, guarded thee whilst thou slept. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. May I be willing, Lord, to bear daily my cross for thee, even thy cup of grief to share, thou hast borne all for me. Lest I forget Gethsemane, lest I forget thine agony, lest I forget thy love for me, lead me to Calvary. I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he could love me, a sinner condemned unclean. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. For me it was in the garden, he prayed, not my will but thine. He had no tears for his own griefs, but sweat drops of blood for mine. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. He took my sins and my sorrows, he made them his very own. He bore the burden to Calvary and suffered and died alone. Oh, how marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. O God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. O God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to walk in your ways, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all of my days. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. Oh God, you are my God, and I will ever praise you. I will seek you in the morning, and I will learn to walk in your ways, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all of my days. I will follow you all of my days, and I will follow you all of my days, and step by step you'll lead me, and I will follow you all of my days.
Steve, let's pray. Father, thank you for this glorious day, for the wind, for the blessings that you give us. Help us to understand that all things are in your control, and sometimes they may make us uncomfortable, but you're God, and you know what you're doing. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight, especially for Dennis and the lesson he's planned, and ask that you would help us to have tender hearts to your word, to listen, to hear, and to act in love and obedience. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Not one stone will be left upon another. Let's just get right into this. Mark 13. Mark 13. We're going to look at the whole chapter, maybe. Hopefully, we can cover all of this chapter, because it's all one idea. This passage, Matthew 24, is another one. That's the, I think it's Matthew 24. That's the parallel passage. Yeah, Matthew 24 is the parallel passage, but I just want to focus on this passage here and what is being taught just in this passage. Sometimes as we look at the synoptic gospels, that means those that are similar in content, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we want to glob them all together and make a kind of a one gospel fits all mega gospel to cover all of the bases. And each writer is trying to accomplish something different. And what I think Mark is trying to accomplish is for the people of God to realize that a cataclysmic event is going to take place soon. And don't be deceived, and don't be distracted, and don't lose heart. The title, "Not one stone will be left upon another," is a phrase that refers to what Jesus says is going to happen to the temple. He's talking about the temple here. So verses 1 and 2 give us an introduction. As he was going out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Teacher, look at what massive stones, what impressive buildings." Jesus said to him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left upon another. All will be thrown down." So that's quite a statement. That's quite a prediction. That the disciples would be impressed with the temple is an understatement. It really was a very, very beautiful building. Josephus talks a lot about the temple and about Jerusalem in his writings. Josephus was born in 37 AD. He is a Jewish historian. He spent some time in Rome, so he was kind of impressed with all things Roman, but he also was a Jew. He studied to be a Pharisee. Perhaps his family had hoped he would be a priest because he was from the priest family that existed at that time, the Hasmonean line. And so during Israel's brief time of independence after the Greek Empire, the Hasmonean dynasty ruled, and so this family still had a lot of power. So Josephus was a very connected guy, and his history is accurate. There are some things he says about Jesus in his histories, but he writes a lot about the temple. He was not a Christian, he was a Jew. Pliny, the historian, wrote that Jerusalem was the most splendid city of the East, always full of pilgrims and tourists who would bring prosperity to the city. Herod had built an awesome palace on the summit of the hill in the northwest part of Jerusalem. It had 3 tall towers of white marble, mosaic floors, jeweled furniture, silver and gold everywhere. The Antonia Fortress was built by Herod on the hill just north of the temple so that it looked like part of the temple complex. Interesting that they build the fortress where the Roman soldiers were garrisoned right near the temple. And maybe why that might be the case, it's because that's where all the trouble turned out to be, was in the temple. It was a huge complex, bigger than the Acropolis in Athens. The temple was built of white stone and marble, so there may be, so I don't know, it looks kind of yellow, doesn't it? But it was, this is just a replica that somebody built based on the descriptions and based on what is actually left of the city, of the old city. This is all gold, this is marble and white stone, and it was very beautiful. Josephus said, when strangers first saw the temple from a distance, it looked like a mountain covered in snow with glittering gold everywhere, because it was so bright, and whatever was not bright was gold. So it was a very, very beautiful temple that Herod had built. Some people say it was the 3rd temple, some people say it was the 2nd temple, but basically it is the temple that Zerubbabel and Ezra built, but Herod greatly expanded and improved it. The temple that Herod built was, let me see if I can find that. Let's see. After Herod's work, the temple was huge, nearly 500 yards long and 400 yards wide. Does anybody know what the original temple size was? Okay, I just wondered.
Cubits by cubits.
It was cubits by cubits. It was only 60 yards long and 30 yards wide. So Herod made it really big and really ornate, probably veered a little bit from the plans that we find in the Chronicles and the Kings and the directions that God gave to David and, of course, to Moses in regards to the tabernacle. It took him, he started in 19 BC, Herod started in 19 BC, and it was not completed until AD 63, so it took 80 years. My guess is whatever was original from Ezra's temple was completely gone. I've heard about this done to avoid building code restrictions. I saw this several times in Tacoma. They would buy an old building, a store, but the land permit would not let them build a big store. So what they did was added on to the little store. And then after a while, they just tore the little old store down and they end up with the big store. I think Herod probably did something like that. It was not the original temple, the size, the specifications. Some of the furniture, of course, was the same, and they would have been serious about that. So this magnificent temple compound was finished 7 years before it was destroyed. This is another rendition of that, and I wanted to show you this because some of this is still standing. You know which of this is still standing?
Just the base, isn't it?
Yeah, this
Just
wall.
the base.
Yeah, this wall right here. So the temple was built on a mount, and when you look at some of the replicas of it, you can see they built retaining walls all the way around it. And that's what this is, a retaining wall. And this is the western wall, the back side of the temple. The temple faces east.
Is that the Wailing Wall?
That is the Wailing Wall or the western wall, yes. Okay, now go to the next picture. This is a picture of things before they began to clean it up. And as you can see, whatever is left of the temple is true to what Jesus said, not one stone will be left upon another. The next one, this shows the present day. Of course, this is the Alaska Mosque. Here's the western wall. Now, see this arch? Can you see the arch right there? Okay, go back to the first image.
This one?
There, that's it. No, go back to that, yeah. That's that. That's the top of that arch. So, go back. So you can see, there's the arch. There's only, so a lot of that went further down. This was one of the walls that extended to the west of the city. And, but this is, they just filled everything in. So they don't even know where the original temple stood. They have an idea, but it is just so, everything is so different. Probably where the mosque is somewhere where the temple was. But yeah, this is the Wailing Wall. You can see the Orthodox, very strict Jews doing their thing. People go there to pray and to ask God for favor. And so that's what's left of the temple to this day. And so Jesus was right when he said, not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down. Verse 3, the disciples ask what appears to be two questions. The first question is, when will these things happen? And what will be the signs of these things happening? So question 1 and question 2. So when they ask, when will these things happen? What things are they asking about? What's that?
Temple.
The temple. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out. There is no other point that's being discussed here. Simply the destruction of the temple. I'm calling it the invasion of Judea because that's what happens here. It's not just the destruction of the temple, it's really the end of the Jewish homeland. It is the end of the Jews' ability to track who they are, their family lines. There may be some things related to that. All of the temple materials would be gone, and there would be no way to tell who was what, to follow ancestral lines, all of the things related to being a Jew, to Judaism of that time.
They had lost that before that temple even was built, hadn't they?
Well, they did, but Babylon took stuff from the temple. So they may have preserved writings. They, here, in this case, when the temple is destroyed in AD 70, I mean, it's gone. They take a couple of items out, but it is, they spared nothing. And there wasn't a chance. Babylon went in there. That's when Daniel was taken and some of the other nobles. So when they did that, they took a bunch of the stuff, and they took a lot of the valuables that were in the temple, and that happened actually 3 times. The final one was when they wiped it out. So maybe, but my understanding is they took some of the materials related to the temple because Babylon wanted to preserve the best of the lands that they conquered. That's why they took Daniel. And that's why they took people from the lands they conquered and settled them in Judea because they wanted a unity, and they wanted all of the information that they could get that would help them to rule their people. So what things will happen, talking about the invasion of Judea and the destruction of the city of Jerusalem, AD 70, we refer to it. What will the sign be that these things will be accomplished? Is the second question. And Jesus never really specifically answers that, except in when this happens, you'll know it. That's about all he does in regards to an answer for that question.
Do you think when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not?
It's definitely, yeah, that's definitely, I think it is a reference to the desecration of the temple.
Oh, I do too. I was just
Yeah.
wondering if maybe that was Titus or reference
Right,
to someone like that, a veiled
yeah,
description.
we'll get to that, and so let's kind of move forward. But yeah, that's what that is. Oh, I see where you're going, about a sign.
About a sign, yeah.
Right, yeah, he does give that indicator when you see this. So maybe that is a sign, but it's more an indicator of the things that are going to happen. And so maybe, because, not to focus too much, but some of the other Gospels talk about that these things, maybe it's that sometimes we will look at different things and say they're signs, like wars and rumors of wars. Yeah. Is that the indicator? And so let's try and work through this, but certainly that is an indicator, as I guess kind of a sign. And then he also talks later on, he talks about the fig tree. But I see that as us paying attention to the things that happen. Sometimes we don't always pay enough attention to stuff. I think that is how our country got so far down the wrong path, is that we didn't know what they were up to. Yeah.
Some people on number 2 divided it into 2 different questions.
Right.
It says, what is the sign of Jesus coming, and also what is the end of the age? So
Right,
they're into
and that's what's in Matthew 24.
Right.
So I want to avoid that for this purpose, but yeah, and I think Matthew 24, Jesus also says, don't expect some sign, the normal signs that we expect, like there's an earthquake, oh, there's a sign, volcano going off, oh, that's a sign, war, oh, that's a sign. No, none of those are signs. As a matter of fact, so when we get into this next section, so let's look at verse 3. While he was sitting on the Mount of Olives across from the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately, "Tell us, when will these things happen, and what will be the sign when all these things are about to be accomplished?" Jesus told them, "Watch out that no one deceives you. Many will come in my name, saying, 'I am he,' and they will deceive many. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, don't be alarmed. These things must take place, but it is not the end yet. For nation will rise up against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places and famines." So those things that maybe we might look at as signs are not signs that the end's coming. It's just the nature of stuff. And that stuff still goes on today, right? Wars, big war in Asia and Russia and Ukraine, big war. Earthquakes, I've heard about some of those lately. We're going through a famine, or so we're told, because there's no food on the shelves in the grocery stores. So I'm just being facetious with that one. And but these things happen. These are just the give and take of life. So don't look at these things and think, And that's what Jesus is telling them. Don't look at these things and think they are signs of the end. They're not. He calls them birth pains.
What are birth pains?
Ask any one of us.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
I watched.
You watch, yeah. The beginnings of birth pains, that means something is happening. And these things that Jesus mentions are just part of the pain of living on the planet. Part of the pain of life on the planet. They're not signs. It is the give and take and of the human experience.
But the beginning of birth pain is an indicator that it's coming.
Something is coming, yeah.
I mean, so it is an indicator.
Something is coming. Yes, it is an indicator in a sense, but they are the things related to the ministry of Jesus. The struggle between kingdoms and rulers and authorities in this earth, on this earth. It's the way it is. We are the United Nations, but the United Nations hasn't been doing a really quality, bang-up job keeping the planet safe from war. So humans are going to try to, I'm going to assume that everybody's trying to do what's right, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's just the selfishness of humanity and the resistance against the message of Christ. So, and that's what he's talking about, and that's what a lot of this comes down to. This is the end of the Jewish nation. And that's his point. They ask, when will this happen? He's talking about the end of the Jewish nation, the invasion of Judea. But these are not the signs, these are we'll use the word indicators, and I kind of like that word too. But it's, as an indicator, it's telling us that something is going to happen. Something is going to take place. And what he's talking about, that something is the invasion of Judea, the destruction of the city, the beautiful city of Jerusalem. So the beginning, perhaps, of the end, or the beginning, and I don't know, I may be reading too much into the analogy, but we go through, not we, women go through birth pains. Because I heard men can't get pregnant. That's what I heard. And
So on PC.
yeah, and so generally speaking, the end of birth pains is something new and beautiful. I may be reading too much into that, but I think that's what Jesus is trying to get us to keep our eyes on. He says, don't be deceived by this stuff. There'll be false prophets, false messiahs, there'll be wars and rumors of wars, famines and earthquakes. Don't be deceived by this stuff. There were several wars leading up to AD 70. Not only were the Jews a constant thorn in the flesh of the Roman government, but there were different factions within Judaism. We know the Pharisees and the Sadducees. There were the Zealots and other extremists. There were the people, the Essenes, that lived out in the community of Qumran. So there's several factions of Jews that over time began to fight each other. There were 3 different factions at the time that the Romans were trying to put an end to the friction and the tension and the rebellion of Rome. So between these 3 Jewish factions, And twice, the Jews actually beat the Romans. Let's go back to one of the pictures. Let me show you. Okay, keep going. Oh, yeah, no, go right here. No, there. Okay, in the background there, right up in here, this was the fortress of Antonius. And so that's where the Roman garrison was housed, and the Zealots took that. They killed, there was 1,000 soldiers in there. So they took that. And then they sent a 20,000-man army from Syria, because that was the closest legion to Jerusalem from Syria. They sent that army to quell the rebellion, and the Jews beat them too. So once they had the fortress, which was at a high place looking over the city, they had control of the area. And so after the Antonia Fortress was taken by the Jews and the small garrison slaughtered, the nearest legions were in Antioch, Syria. The Roman commander Sentius marched his army to Jerusalem, but amazingly, the Jewish insurgents defeated him. So,
What was the year in that?
this is in 64, 66, in that time frame. And so, if you were a Jew and in your small army beat the big Roman army, not once but twice, what are you thinking? What are you thinking?
You're invincible.
You're invincible. This must be, somewhere in this must be the Messiah. They'd already, as a nation, they already rejected their Messiah. So, and that's what the wars and the rumors of wars are all about. Don't be deceived. False prophets will come. False messiahs will come. There'll be this battle. And, who knew that they could win, but they did. Twice. So again, this is all dealing with and pointing to the invasion of Judea.
Are these words just for disciples or for the whole church?
These words were, I think for the disciples that Jesus was talking to, but of course, I might be jumping ahead, what would be the message to us?
Be prepared.
Oh, be prepared, yeah, most definitely.
Signs.
Okay.
Deceived by all these things that are coming up.
Don't be deceived. There's been a lot of false religions, etc., since that time. And
No matter what.
yeah.
Keep on keeping on.
Yeah, and several times in this section he talks about enduring. He talks about not giving up. And he is encouraging us, Jesus is encouraging us to pay attention to what is going on. What we know, what Jesus says here, came to pass, right? What Jesus says here came to pass. And he brings in another point that really has meaning to us today. But this has a lot of meaning to me. This means that the Lord I serve is the Lord of history. And what he says comes to pass. I can trust him then with all the other areas of my life. And that's what he's asking us to do. He's asking us to trust him with everything, with all of our lives, every part of our lives. And don't be deceived, and don't be discouraged, and don't be misled. It wasn't long until Vespasian and Titus came to Judea. They had Vespasian was a well-known general. Titus was his son, and they raised an army. Josephus says about 60,000 troops. They're going to get it done. His son Titus was also a general, and between the two of them and their armies, they were going to get it done. Their strategy was to bring their army through Syria, attacking from the north and taking all the cities and strongholds in the Galilean area first, and then work their way south to Jerusalem. Josephus ended up being one of the generals in the Jewish army. They were coming to him. He took refuge at a fortress called Jotapata, and it was on a steep hill with deep ravines on three sides, and it had a very strong wall. The Romans laid siege to Jotapata in spring of 67 AD. They had artillery. It's really interesting. They had scorpions and catapults. Anybody who was into the game Age of Empires knows about catapults and scorpions. The scorpions were large mounted crossbows that could shoot multiple arrows at the same time at a high velocity. The catapults hurled projectiles soaked in oil and lit on fire. When the projectiles landed, the oil splattered and the fire spread. They built assault platforms to where they could shoot over the walls. And on the 47th day of the siege, the Romans poured over the walls, and just before dawn, they invaded that city and killed 40,000 Jews. So, sometimes we talk about AD 70, like, oh, it was AD 70. But it really was a horrendous, terrible time, and you get that as you read on through this passage. Verse 9, be on your guard. They will hand you over to local courts, and you will be flogged in the synagogues. You will stand before governors and kings because of me as a witness to them. And it is necessary that the gospel be preached to all nations. So when they come to you and hand you over, don't worry beforehand what you will say, but say whatever is given to you at that time, for it isn't you speaking, but the Holy Spirit. Go to the next. It's called the Arch of Titus, and it's located in Rome. It's still there to this day. And what is this?
The candle, the lampstand.
Yeah, that's from the temple. And so this is a capture of Titus marching his army through the streets of Rome. I think this might be the altar. So they did take a couple of items from the temple, but not a whole lot that was left over after the destruction, because they didn't get a chance to go in there. The Jews were not giving up the territory. They literally fought to the last person until there was no one left to fight, till the army was defeated. There were still a lot of civilians there that were taken captive. And so some of these are the captives, the Jews that were taken captive.
Dennis, without going into great detail, when Jesus said that such things as this have not happened since creation, nor will they happen again in that like manner, I take it very literally that this was such a cruel invasion and things done absolutely inhumane and savage to the Jews that it, and those things are available to read, but they are not the kind of thing that you really want to talk about.
It's not positive reading, and that's exactly right. Jesus says, be on your guard. And let's quickly go ahead through these 4 points here. Be on your guard because there will be persecution. And again, if all of this stuff is going on, you may think, well, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing what I'm supposed to do? Am I following the right Messiah? Is something else going on here? But there's going to be persecution. In whatever our situation is, trust that the Holy Spirit will guide you through these difficulties. And that's what Jesus reminds them. Third point from this section is that there's going to be betrayal. And that's part of that would be, there's wars and rumors of wars, nations against nations, but there's going to be conflict between people too. And because of your commitment to Christ, others will betray you. But he says, endure to the end. Brother will betray brother to death, a father his child. Children will rise up against parents and have them put to death. You will be hated by everyone because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. Verse 14, when you see the abomination of desolation, that phrase usually refers to the desecration of the temple. On the heading of my Bible says the Great Tribulation. And so, question is, what is the Great Tribulation? And some people began to look at this passage and similar ones in the other gospel accounts and thinking, well, this is talking about a time after the age of the church or toward the end times. But Jesus isn't answering that question. So I just wanted to underline that. When you see the abomination of desolation standing where it should not be, let the reader understand. So that let the reader understand is a parenthetical statement that Mark is putting in there, meaning you should understand what I'm saying here. And that phrase comes from Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, referring to first. Well, let's look at that really quick. 9:27, Daniel 9:27. It says, he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice. So that reference to the covenant is not talking about a covenant of between God and his people. We usually use that word to talk about the relationship between God and his people. But here it has to do with an agreement, and during this period of time, when Antioch Epiphanes was the ruler, kind of the overlord, their overlord at this time, they had a really corrupt relationship between the priests and the people of the dynasty, of the Seleucid dynasty. So that's what this covenant is referring to. But in the middle of the week, he will put a stop to sacrifice and offering, and the abomination of desolation will be on a wing of the temple until the decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator. And then Daniel 11:3, just 11:31 is another reference to that. Talking about the ruler from the south, verse 29. Again, he will come again to the south, but this time it will not be like the first. The ships of Kittim will come against him. So the ships of Kittim refer to the Roman Navy, and they they give Antiochus Epiphanes, they do a battle, and he withdraws, and then he withdraws up to the land of Judea. Then he will rage against the Holy Covenant and take action on his return. He will favor those who abandon the Holy Covenant. So there's that corruption. His forces will rise up and desecrate the temple fortress. They will abolish the regular sacrifice and set up an abomination of desolation. With flattery, he will corrupt those who act wickedly toward the covenant. But the people who know their God will be strong and take action. And that's a reference to the Maccabean revolt. So this statement, the abomination of desolation, is the desecration of the temple. And that is what Titus does. Titus, after the destruction of the city, it says, so this is another from Josephus, and now the Romans, upon the flight of the seditious into the city, and upon the burning of the holy house itself, and all of the buildings round about it, brought their ensigns to the temple, and set them over against its eastern gate, where they did offer sacrifices to them, and there they did make Titus imperator. And it was common when the Romans conquered a city, something like this, they would, what's the word? What's the opposite of desecrate?
Build up.
No?
Consecrate.
Consecrate, that's the word I'm looking for. They would consecrate this conquered area by offering a pig. And if you want to insult Jews, that's what you would do. And so that is why this is a reference to the desecration of the temple and the destruction of the temple. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. A man on the housetop must not come down or go in to get anything out of his house. A man in the field must not go back to get his coat. Woe to pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. And all of that is true. Once they were able to stamp out the remnants of the Jewish army, it was tragic. Pray it won't happen in winter, for those days of tribulation, the kind that hasn't been from the beginning of creation until now and never will be again. If the Lord had not cut those days short, no one would be saved. But he cut those days short for the sake of the elect whom he chose. Then if anyone tells you, see, here's the Messiah, see there, do not believe it, for false messiahs and false prophets will arise and perform signs and wonders to lead astray, if possible, the elect. And you must watch. I have told you everything in advance. So Jesus is warning us to not be deceived. And then he goes and he talks about, I think he changes topic, but for the purpose of people understanding that this is not the end. It's the end of the Jewish nation, as they understood it, but this isn't the end. The Messiah isn't coming back at this point. It's not the return of the Messiah. Because that was not the original question that the disciples had. They just want to know when the temple is going to be destroyed. When not one stone will be left upon another. That's what they're asking. Because that's what Jesus told them. When is this going to happen? So the return of Christ is not a part of the original prediction, but I think he is emphasizing that this is not that. What's happening in the invasion of Judea is not the second coming of Jesus. So don't be deceived. Don't give up. Endure till the end. Verse 24, in those days, after that tribulation, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, and the stars will be falling from the sky, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. That's definitely end time terminology. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. They see verse 26 as your Captain Obvious moment. Everyone will see when Jesus returns. It's not going to be something you have to decipher or we're going to find it in the signs, because that's not the way it's going to come down. We will all see when Jesus returns. There will be no question about it. Every person will see it. They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. He will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. So that's what I think his point is. The destruction of Judea is not a sign for the second coming of Christ. False prophets and messiahs will exploit the situation. And I've heard people say that because of this statement, and I think misunderstanding this passage, people believed that the second coming of Jesus was imminent. Jesus says, this ain't that. This is going to be bad. But it's not the end. It's not the end of the world. That end will come, but this isn't that. So then, verse 28, learn this lesson from the fig tree. So with that statement, he's saying maybe the idea of a sign or an indicator. Or what I've said is that, go ahead, the next one, pay close attention to what's going on in the world. Pay close attention, because if you want to know, then it's gonna unfold in history. These things are the birth pangs, but it's slowly going to unfold. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see these things happening, recognize that it is near at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place.
I think that's where the confusion comes in.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if he had to put in that part about the coming of the Son of Man.
Yes.
Then it'd be easy to understand, okay, they're gonna be there for it, but.
Right. I think that's a good observation, and that's why I wanted to stress, Jesus is saying, this ain't that. The destruction, the invasion of Judea, the end of the Jewish homeland, is what's being talked about, not the second coming. But I think he mentions that just to be specific. What's happening here is not, I'm not coming back. That's not me coming back. That's really God's judgment on the nation of Israel. That's what that is. And just let me say that that several Jewish writers of that time understood that this was a judgment from God because of our waywardness. And if you were in the Daniel class here on Sunday morning, we would have covered that Daniel, in one of his visions, sees something that just breaks his heart. And this makes sense. It's the end of the Jewish nation. And he mourns for 21 days. He can't even write about it because, well, the writer, the angel tells him, don't write about it. So, but it's so terrible. So, but what were you going to say?
Layered throughout this is the instruction of, if you don't watch it, you're going to fall. And in tough times, you know, we often ask ourselves, what happens with our children, what happens with the church? Well, it's tough times, and this is a clear instruction that during those times, you really have to concentrate not only on your own salvation, but look at the body.
Yeah.
And see what's happening, and see how many folk we lose because of confusion, misunderstanding, the rough surf, if you would. You know, the instruction that if it wasn't shortened, even the elect would fall.
Yeah.
That's deadly serious.
Yeah, yeah.
I think there's another audience here that we, and I think your class is great. John writes that there's more, you know, all the books of the world could not contain what Jesus taught. And the other audience I'm thinking of is Mark's audience, the early church. And I think he's doing just exactly what you're saying. I was just looking it up, and they're guessing that the book of Mark was written between 65 and 75, which is right there.
Right, yeah.
And so if it's before 80, 70, he's preparing the early church, I think, for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that too. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. He is preparing them for what's going to happen. I would assume that if it had happened, as far as Mark goes, he would have made some mention to it, like, you guys saw it happened. But yeah, he's preparing them. And I think there's a third audience, of course, us. Jewish people. Not just Christians, and not just Jewish Christians, but Jewish people who may be good people, but they're mistaken. May be sincere, but they're sincerely wrong. And Jesus is saying, don't confuse what's happening here. So yeah, so I think that's a good point, Perry. Let me see if I can get this thing wrapped up. This last point comes at the end of the section. Now concerning that day or hour, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son. Okay. Now concerning that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. So, what is that day? Is it the day of the destruction of the temple, or the day of the return of Jesus?
Jesus' return.
The end of the age.
Aren't the principles the same one way or the other?
Well, I think, yeah. I think it could be genuinely talking about both. About both. My contextual propensity is telling me it's talking about the day of the destruction of Jerusalem. But Jesus brings up the other point too, and maybe he's just wrapping it up there, putting a bow on it. That no one knows when that day is going to come. So he says something that he has said in other places. Watch out, be alert, for you don't know when the time is coming. It is like a man on a journey who left his house, gave authority to his servants, and gave each one his work, and commanded the doorkeeper, be alert. Therefore, be alert, since you do not know when the master of the house is coming, whether in the evening, or at midnight, or at the crowing of the rooster, or early in the morning. Otherwise, when he comes, he might find you sleeping. And what I say to you, I say to everyone. Be alert.
Amen.
So, going back to, truly I say this generation will not pass away until all these things take place, is referring to
The people who are listening.
The
to
70 AD.
Yeah, exactly,
So
yeah.
you think that this kind of, this 24 to 27 is just kind of a
Parenthetical, yeah. Meaning, because when all the stuff starts happening, and people, he says there's going to be,
because it's after the tribulation. That's what he says.
yeah.
But in those
After
days,
those-
after that tribulation.
In those days, after the tribulation, yeah, after, so, yeah, 24, he's referencing his return, so that's something that's gonna happen at some point. No one knows the hour, so, yeah.
But verse 30 is referring to the 70 AD.
Verse 30, yes, I think so. Yes, I'm, just a simple reading of that statement.
It
This
is kind of
generation-
confusing, his flip-flopping.
Well, so he's doing that so we won't mistake and say if we were alive back then and we saw this stuff coming on, and then you've got the false messiahs and hey, he already said that earlier, verse 21. Then if anyone tells you, see, here's a Messiah, see there, do not believe it. So I think that's the contextual reason for him saying, this isn't my return. The destruction of Judea is not my return.
Because you'll know it when it comes.
You will know it. Yeah, you will know it. Good, all right.
Hey, Dennis?
Yes,
I
Taylor,
was
yeah.
just gonna say one last thing. Either one, those are both days of the Lord. The day
Yes,
of the Lord, when he intervenes in history.
yes. That's a whole nother very exciting study, and realizing that from time to time, God intervenes in human history.
Amen.
And he's going to do it again. So be ready. Not be alert, stay alert. We're done, thank you.
Baker, you can hold that ball.
Your 16-year-old.
And of course, it's because I agree with you.